Donald Trump is expected to announce a new plan to arm Ukraine with offensive weapons. Reports it's likely to include long-range missiles which could reach targets deep inside Russia. Donald Trump also meeting the NATO Secretary-General today, expected to deliver a statement this evening. Our security and defence analyst, Professor Michael Clarke, joins us now. Michael, this is quite the turnaround because Donald Trump had generally been associated with not arming Ukraine, and now it seems as though offensive weapons may be on the cards. We've been talking in previous days about defensive weapons, anti-aircraft and anti-missile kind of batteries, but now potentially allowing Ukraine to strike back. Harder.
Yes, I mean, if this is a turnaround, then it's quite a big turnaround, if that's what it is. And they're being very cautious in Kyiv this morning, saying, you know, we're grateful for anything that President Trump says, but we can't expect him to go back to where the Americans were before Trump became president. Nevertheless, it does appear that President Trump has reassessed his relationship with Vladimir Putin and is preparing some sort of statement which will have probably maybe three elements. One element is more sanctions and pressure on Russia, and there's a big bill ready to go in Congress of 500% sanctions worth hundreds of billions of dollars of trade, including secondary sanctions. So he might go along with that, or parts of it. Secondly is Patriot Defence, air defence batteries, which he's already said he would provide under an arrangement where they sell them to the Europeans give them to Ukraine. And then thirdly, and this is the most interesting bit, if this is what he says, is the supply of offensive weapons, or the sale maybe of offensive weapons to Ukraine, because that would imply that he's accepted that Ukraine will continue the war, that Ukraine has given up on a ceasefire, as the way everybody else has, that the Russians are not going to come to a ceasefire until they're under greater pressure. And so maybe that would be the third element in what he says. But we don't know. I don't think even in the Pentagon they're entirely sure what he's going to say. And there's a lot of choreography going on here. Keith Kellogg, the American envoy, is in Kyiv. Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary-General, is in Washington. Boris Pistorius, the German Defence Minister, is in Washington. A great deal of choreography is behind this statement because it's I think it would be quite a complex package of different things.
And it's important, isn't it? The situation in Ukraine is being watched very closely by other countries. You know where I'm going with this, China. Yeah. And it's important from the West's perspective to signal that you cannot just walk into another territory, Taiwan, and get away with it. And so there will be a lot of pressure from certainly the European perspective to continue on, the US is continuing to be on board with the fact that Ukraine cannot fail, that it cannot, you know, be rolled over by the Russians, because other countries are watching and taking notes.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Gareth, because, I mean, when this war started on I think it was the March the 3rd, 2022, a big vote in the United Nations, 144 nations condemned it, and 35 nations abstained, and 5 voted against. So it was 144 versus 40, but those 40 contain more than half of the world's population. So the rest of the world has been standing back from the very beginning to see what happens. And this is a sort of a contest between those who say, look, the Ukraine war is the front line in a more fundamental struggle between dictatorship and liberal democracy, and those, including the Trump and the MAGA Republicans, who say this is a regional war. You know, it's just a regional war, it's nasty, and it's not our problem. And what the Europeans are saying, look, it is your problem if you think you're ever going to be a liberal democracy, if you're ever going to stand with the liberal democracies. Now, would President Trump come onto that side of the argument? I doubt it. But his credibility is on the line, and America's credibility is on the line as to whether, you know, America's going to look as if it's been manipulated by the Russians and Trump has been manipulated by Putin. And you suspect, given that Trump sees power in very personal terms, is that he has got offended by Putin's apparent insouciance to say nice things to him on the phone and talk about the need to address all the diplomatic issues, and then the following night to bombard Ukraine with 500, 600, 700 drones and missiles. I think Trump seems to be personally affronted by that behaviour. So Putin may have overplayed his hand, but we'll find out later today, I guess.